All right, everybody, welcome back to the ATB NFL Live Show. We're here with our Week 14 preview. Definitely glad to be back. I got a streak going. We haven't had any mishaps to keep us from coming on the show, so that's definitely good. Anytime you start a new thing, obviously it can be a little difficult to get it running, but glad we're all able to be here for today. So definitely some big stuff going on in the NFL. One thing in particular that I think I want to start off with, just because it's the most recent kind of big thing that's happened. But a lot to talk about. We're going to go over all the games. Pretty good slate of games this week, even though some of the lines I think are a little crazy, but I think we're going to get better games than maybe the line suggests with as far as betting lines go. But I do want to start with a brief conversation. I don't want to spend too much time on it just because, we'll see how it goes from here. But the Baker Mayfield situation with the Rams, him showing up on Tuesday this past week, and then actually showing up and not only just getting ready to play, but having to basically start because Wolford barely played. I think he played the first drive of the game, and then McVay said, "Nope, we're getting Baker in there." That that situation was kind of crazy to watch. I was actually at a friend's to surprise him for his birthday, and we ended up watching that game. And for most of it, we were kind of struggling through it, but then the end happened. So definitely want to get you guys' opinion on what's going on with that. What do you think that this game means, if it means anything, and what does kind of Baker's immediate future with the Rams look like? Let's start with Zach here.
Yeah. So I was in Philadelphia that night. And the bar that I was at while I was waiting for the show that I went to that night did not have the game. So I was just paying attention to it on my phone, and it did not look like it was that great of a game. And I mean, the Raiders have played much better games this year, but 17-16 loss of the Rams is pretty bad. So I'm not quite sure what's gonna be going on for their future as overall, as far as the Rams are, or the 40, the Raiders are concerned. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with them. Because we've already been told that they can't fire their head coach; they don't have the money. And the offense is a mess. They have Josh Jacobs and they have Devontae Adams, but Derek Carr hasn't really been cutting the mustard this season, and it's been kind of slightly disappointing because this is not supposed to be the Raiders that we saw this season. The Rams, though, they need to figure out what the hell they're going to do for the future at all, because they have seemingly no plan whatsoever. So it's these two teams have had a very, very disappointing season for the both of them, and it'll be very interesting to see where they go in the off season, given the fact the Rams have no assets.
What do you think, Tony? What do you think about this whole situation with the Rams, Raiders, all of it?
Yeah, I think the first thing I want to say is just I'm impressed. I am just incredibly impressed that a guy who, we've seen the career arc of Baker Mayfield and whether or not he deserved to be pushed out by Cleveland, why things stunk terribly in Carolina, and then 2 days to go and learn an incredibly complex playbook. These are not easy playbooks to learn when you're in that McVay coaching tree. And he learned enough of it to go in and win that game. It wasn't pretty, but is crazy. And running 2-minute drills, which is probably the hardest part of acclimating to a new offense. You don't know anybody's name and you're running a 2-minute drill and it's working. So it's very impressive on that front. We saw McVay probably look like the happiest he has all season. We saw the old Baker, the underdog, feisty Baker. It was just cool to see all those personalities come back. I don't think it means anything. Rest of the season, the Rams are going to be more like the Rams we have seen. They're not going to be winning many games. The cool thing for Baker's sake is that he's now in a place where they're going to make it easy on him, and that's probably going to get him a tryout next year, to a team who maybe the Colts or somebody who can't draft super high and have to take a shot on a developmental guy. So I think it's going to lead to some sort of opportunity for Baker. Great for him. The Rams as a whole, my question is, who's returning? Because we know that Liam Cohen is going back to Kentucky to be the offensive coordinator there. A wild move to leave the offensive coordinator job behind Sean McVay, which is the easiest pipeline to head coach in NFL. it just produces head coaches every single year. Kevin O'Connell, like it just always does. To leave that and go be an offensive coordinator under Stoops at Kentucky, it's like something is amiss. And then we've heard the rumors about Donald retiring, about Stafford retiring, about how McVay was going to retire when those guys retire. And the questions start to really arise. So if they keep that core together, then I think we're going to see something closer to the 2021 Rams than we have seen this year. But it all depends on that, because this could be the end of the Rams era as we know it.
Yeah, and I think it is interesting because, like, you look at this game, and obviously I do want to start with talking about Baker did so much considering his situation, right? And, we can sit there and say, oh, the Raiders were bad. They scored 17 points. It's all they scored. But, again, this guy showed up on Tuesday. Like, Tuesday night is when he showed up to the Rams, and he played for them, which is just, you don't see that happen. The last time something similar to that happened, I think, what was Josh Freeman for, like, I think it was the Vikings or Giants. I forget who it was. That he just showed up and was like, yeah, I guess I'm going to play, and just went out there and just did absolutely nothing at all because, of course he did. But with this situation, I will say he did have a little bit of, I think, a head start just because with Stefanski, with that playbook that he learned is similar to what McVay runs. So it did give him at least a baseline of knowledge probably of like what kind of concepts he might be looking at and like who he should be looking for in certain situations. But again, he had basically the equivalent of a full day of prep work to get ready for this game and goes in there after the first drive and ends up winning the game on a 98-yard touchdown drive, which reminiscent of, if you guys remember the Vince Young drive from years and years ago where he went 98 yards. Like that's the type of situation that he basically had, and he got it done. Like at the end of the day, like you can say whatever you want about Baker. I think that he's still, whenever he's at his best, he's at least a quality starting quarterback. He'll probably never be anything more than that, even in the best situation. But again, teams need those types of players, even if they end up becoming backups long term or whatever it may be. He showed a lot in this game. When they let him throw the ball, he was fantastic on a lot. Like he converted a lot of big plays, and a lot of his throws were down the field. Like it wasn't a ton of short stuff. If he can continue to do that, they're at least going to be competitive. I don't think that they're going to win much, like you said, Tony. I don't think that they're just a good enough team with all the injuries and everything else. But it does raise the question, like if Stafford retires, do they maybe roll with Baker for a year or two while they figure things out, where they let the cap kind of come back to their direction, and while their assets start to pile back up after all the picks they trade away start to kind of get picked and move on from there. Like there's so much to think about with this Rams team, and like there's going to be a lot of conversation for years, especially if this core does either retire / just leave for some reason or another. Was it worth it? And I think anytime you can get a championship, it is to a certain degree. But people are going to look at it and go, man, could you have maybe still gotten a championship with a more stable way of doing it? But we'll never know that. So them getting a championship, I'm sure they'll take it. And all the guys that, have that ring, they'll take it. But it looks like it might be pretty bleak for their, immediate future at the very least. And
well,
the Raiders, yeah.
If all you have to sacrifice to win a championship is the next 4 to 5 years of your franchise, that's easy. Yeah, Mike Vrabel famously offered to cut his own dick off if he won the Super Bowl, which is a much steeper price to pay. So I say the Rams did the right thing. It was worth it.
Yeah, Mike's also, out of his mind. So there's that. Yeah. But that's fine. Because...
and I think it does depend. If we're just talking about like 4 to 5 years, that's one thing. But I mean, this could be irreparable damage long term that could last more than 4 or 5 years. And when you're talking about that, I mean, that's when you start to be like, was that worth it?
Yeah, but we'll have to wait and see how it plays out. And for the Raiders, all I'm going to say is bad. Just bad. You should walk home. You should not have gotten a plane back. It was just terrible. Derek Carr, I don't know what's going on with him right now, but he either needs to change the scenery or Josh McDaniels needs to get fired into the sun and force them to have to find somebody else to coach, even if they can't pay them or whatever it is. Find somebody who's willing to do it for however much money you can afford. Like it's not good. And I think the biggest problem with them, and this is something that I've noticed throughout the season, is the inconsistent ability or willingness to just lean on Devontae Adams, right? You traded this guy, a lot of draft capital, and you gave him a gigantic, although very understandable deal as part of that. And it just doesn't seem like all the time that they're leaning on him. And clearly in the games where they have, I mean, he's had some of the top 5 performances of the year, fantasy wise and just performance wise, multiple games this year. And it just feels like it's inconsistent how often they go to him. It's clearly it's working.
even Josh Jacobs. I mean,
Yeah,
we just saw him rattle off over 300 scrimmage yards, and they only scored 16 points last. It
against a
just doesn't
Rams
make
team that doesn't
against the
care
Rams.
anymore.
It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, the game
Yeah.
script that like allows you to lean on Josh Jacobs. And I mean, 27 carries, they did. They just didn't
Just didn't. Yeah, they
hit
just
home.
didn't block
Like,
well. Yeah, they didn't
they've
block
already
well.
cut 2 guards since that game. So
Yeah, that was
they're
always going to be the
clearly
biggest problem
trying
with
to
the
do something.
Raiders.
Yeah.
Honestly, is the offensive line for me anyway. So that's
The
probably what they need to
AFC,
focus
the
on.
AFC West as a whole has been one of the biggest disappointments this season. After all offseason talking about how it was supposed to be all of this lethal weapons, all of these like high octane offenses, these big defenses that, I mean, that's the only thing that the Broncos have at this point is that their defense has been on fire all year and kept them in games. But like the Raiders are awful. The Broncos are awful. The Chargers are right in the middle. I mean, they're on the outside looking in. So like it's literally we've had another season of Kansas City just being like, hey, we're the top dogs in our division. Who's coming to get us?
Nobody at all. But let's move on to our next topic here. Lamar's injury situation, the Ravens situation with him. Basically, I just kind of have a question I'm going to throw out to you guys. I have a lot of notes on this myself, but want to let you guys start here. Let's go to Tony first here. Should he consider at least shutting it down, especially if they are losing while he does have to sit out legitimately?
So I'm going to give the ultimate cop-out answer and say it depends.
There we go. Yep.
Yeah. So adding some context to that terrible answer. Basically, their schedule is not terrible. It is a winnable schedule with Tyler Huntley, who we have seen play well. And we have seen him play well and win games without Ronnie Stanley, without cornerbacks that are healthy, without running backs that are healthy. Those players are healthy now. They're there. They're available. It's just Lamar Jackson that's not. And Tyler Huntley can go in and at least run things well enough for them to steal a couple games. So they have the Steelers, the Browns, the Falcons, the Steelers, the Bengals. If he's out 1 to 3 weeks, like they say that injury is, and they get a win over the Steelers, or so Steelers, Browns, Falcons, if they get 2 wins out of that, then he should come back because now you're playing for a title. You're still in it. All you have to do is beat the Bengals in week 18 and boom, you're in. I think he should come back in that situation because everybody wants to play in the playoffs. But if they don't win these games, if they go 0-2, 0-3, then he should just say, put me on IR because he shouldn't be out there risking it for an organization that has proven that they don't see him as the franchise guy, despite all the evidence that he is. They refused to pay him before the Deshaun Watson situation ever came in and really made it more difficult. They refuse to surround him with weapons. They run this archaic Greg Roman offense where they bunch everything up as tight as possible when he is the best space player in the NFL. He is just being done in a complete disservice being on this team, and they have done nothing to help him. So if they go 0-2, 0-3, then he should shut it down, and he's probably played his last game as a Raven. And we'll see him light things up in some other offense that treats him better. But if they're winning games, and they probably will win a couple, then we know what's going to happen. He's going to come back. They're going to make the playoffs, and they're going to lose in the divisional round. But that's my it depends answer.
What do you think, Zach?
We're gonna see him light it up in Detroit.
I love it.
That would be great. The Lamar Jackson injury is very interesting because, like Tony said, there is no like bigger evidence that he is like the heart and soul of this Ravens offense. Tyler Huntley can do it, and we've seen him do it, but he is also a backup. There's a reason why he's not starting. I feel like after last season, there would have been a few teams that would have bucked up some money if they thought that he could be a starter long term. So like shutting it down is big, and I don't know if Lamar necessarily wants that. Like given the fact that he is his own agent on his like I guess persona as a player, I think a lot of people would understand it. However, given how the league treats black quarterbacks, it could be something that he is avoiding. But he's played hurt so much this year. Like if it hasn't been an injury, he's been sick. I think he's the only person who like continuously contracts something every single week, and then we're like, hey, Lamar, what's going on? What's going on, man? So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Toe is it a toe injury?
I think it's a knee.
Knee. Lawrence is a toe injury. He's a knee injury. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I think Lawrence is another one that we need to look at. Who, like, depending on how he feels and comes back, like I know he might play, but they're 4-8. Like he might want to shut it down for the year if it's that bad. But yeah, I think depending on how Cincinnati goes against Cleveland, because that's always a toss up. That's one thing you have to look at as well, because if Cincinnati can keep winning and challenge the Ravens for the AFC North title, then the Ravens have an issue with Lamar being out. But if they stumble as well, then it might be a little harder for them to pull the plug and say, hey, why don't you sit out the rest of the year and conserve the health?
I think for me, and like I agree with you guys for sure in general. The things I kind of look at is, we know the knee injury is not serious enough that he should miss the rest of the year, right? Like this is a situation where he very well should come back, assuming that, like you said, that this scenario allows him to come back where it's worth it, right? So there's the first thing. So we know that's not going to be the thing that keeps him out, unless he obviously aggravates it or something. But the offensive weapons for them are either injured, bad, or Mark Andrews. That's kind of the three categories of people they have right now. And maybe the occasional Deshaun Jackson 60-yard play because, he's good for those couple times.
I think
Devin
he falls into
Duvernay.
both the injured and bad categories.
Yes, but yeah,
Devin
exactly.
Duvernay's not bad.
So Devin Duvernay is bad in the sense that if he's your receiver one, he's bad because he doesn't actually like play receiver properly because they don't let him do that. Now that is not necessarily his fault, but that's still kind of the situation. Point is, if he comes back, right, we've seen this offense really kind of sputter down the last few, like 4, 5, 6 weeks, mostly because of the fact that he doesn't really feel comfortable, it feels like, throwing to anybody other than Mark Andrews. Not that I can really blame him for that, but that's kind of where we're at. So there's a limited upside, I think, with this offense, not just because of how it's run by Greg Roman, but because of who's currently available to play in it. So that doesn't really help. They're also unlikely, realistically, especially if the offense continues to play like it has, to get past the Chiefs, Bills, or even the Bengals at this point, realistically. Because the Bengals are playing much better football than the last time these teams played.
No, I don't know how their offense gets past the Miami Dolphins.
Even that, we've already seen how that played out whenever they're, granted, that was a weird game, obviously. But I
think it was very different this time around.
Right. But the main point, though, is that if they're going to, if he's going to come back, unless he thinks that this team is capable of beating any of those teams, and again, you could throw the Miami Dolphins in there too, is it worth it whenever you have a big contract coming up to test an injury, even if it's one that, shouldn't happen again? Is it worth it? And to me, I think that realistically, there's a limited ceiling with this team as it currently stands, both because of inconsistency in the passing game, because of the offensive injuries, and also just because of the way that this game works, and also the defense, although very good, does have its moments where man, they can really get thrown on for whatever reason. Marlon Humphrey's been great, but everyone besides him is kind of iffy depending on the week. It just feels like there's not a lot of upside for him to come back and play unless they do get on a run, like you said, Tony, and the offense looks a lot better, and he thinks he can insert himself into that and obviously elevate it even more. So I'm curious to see what he decides to do or what they decide to do with it. I think that if the Ravens choose to shut him down, specifically, like if they come out and say they're shutting him down, that tells me that they know that they kind of don't have a chance this year, and they are interested in finally saying, you know what, let's give him his deal. Let's make sure he's healthy going into next year and just kind of get it done. If he shuts it down, that's when the fun starts, because, what do the Ravens do to that? How do they react to that? Does it become a situation where it's not tenable anymore? That's what I'm very interested to see. But with that being said, there is one last thing we want to talk about a little bit. Don't want to spend too much time on this before we get into the games, but there is some interesting playoff scenarios that I think we're going to be watching down the stretch because of how some teams are playing recently and just kind of where the standings are at. I definitely want to start with the NFC just because I think there's really only two legitimate teams as far as teams that might have a chance to sneak into the wild card, at least, because there is another team we'll probably briefly mention, but their path is pretty much just division based. But I do want to start with them. I'm going to throw the teams out. Obviously, I kind of think we all agree on the teams, pre-show, who we want to talk about. But going to throw it to Zach first, but playoff scenarios for the NFC, I think that Washington, obviously, and even the Lions, believe it or not, after the way they started, I think they both are interesting teams to talk about.
Yes. So the Lions, I'll talk about the Lions because if the Lions make it in, it involves a twofold, I would say, collapse by the NFC East, and that would be by both Washington and New York. Because I don't think Seattle drops out of the playoff race. Their schedule is way too favorable. They've been playing great football, especially for down the stretch and being in the playoffs. I think they could actually make a little bit of noise in the playoffs. But Detroit has been playing fantastic football as of late. They've had a fantastic 5 weeks. Hopefully, looking to make it 6-week run. 5-7, 4 wins over some pretty interesting teams, and a 3-point loss to the Buffalo Bills, which is respectable. They are favored this week against the 10-2 Minnesota Vikings, which we will talk about later. This offense is fantastic in the red zone, and has been scoring as of late. The defense has been getting better. The holding Jacksonville to 14 points is incredibly impressive. Shutting down the Packers, which is what started this little run, was even more surprising. And then they also have a really nice, really like quieting of the Bills, or not the Bills, the Giants. Then was the start of the Giants' downfall. So it's interesting to look at the rest of their schedule. They have the Vikings, the Jets, the Panthers, Bears, and Packers. The last 3 games, very, very, very winnable. So it just depends. Can the Lions get the last 2 or the first 2 wins against the Vikings and Jets and possibly pull off a 6-game win streak to end the season, which would be incredible, given what we've seen from the Jets not the Jets, the Lions as of late. But they have their draft picks are playing fantastic for them, and their veterans have stepped up in a big way. So I think it'd be very interesting to see what happens with the Detroit Lions down the stretch.
What do you think, Tony, with everything?
Yeah, I went to school at Michigan State, so I have a lot of Lions friends, and I have just lived in their misery for so long, and it reshaped my understanding of football. There are just certain teams where no matter how positive things may look, there's always a disaster scenario looming. And I just look at this Lions schedule and I see them being at what would it be, 8-8 going into the last week, playing the Packers, who maybe they're 8-8, and the winner of that game gets into the playoffs. And I'm sorry to put it into the universe, but like, it would be the Packers? Like,
they would be 9-8.
We've seen this story before. Like, so I'm not gonna be able to predict that. I think that I think Washington is gonna take that last wild card spot. I think they're just they're on the outside looking in right now, but that's only because they played games earlier. They're on a bye right now. They're letting the Giants catch up with the loss this week. And then so they played the Giants last week. They won. It was a close game. Or no, they tied. Sorry. They tied, which is closer to a win than a loss, I guess I'd say. But
did you guys see the end of that game?
Kinda.
It's just always so, not to interrupt you, it's always so awkward when an NFL game ends in a tie, because like the time goes off the clock and everybody's just kind of like, all right.
You happy?
Yeah, like literally, like there's no emotion on either side. It's so strange. Like the next time you get a chance, look up like any sort of like end reaction to a tie, and it's the weirdest thing to really like look at because they're just so not used to it.
Yeah.
Anyways,
it's a rarity.
Tied games are so weird. I've never been able to.
Yeah, but they tied, right? And now they're on bye. They continue game planning for the Giants, who don't have a lot of tricks to pull out of the bag. Like we know what the Giants are. So I think they're going to curb stomp them next week. And they're just gonna take the Giants spot and they're gonna fill that, and they're not gonna let go. But I did want to just put that terrible Lions scenario out into the universe because that's just how Lions fandom is. But Washington, and then I'll add this prediction to it. So they're gonna have the last playoff spot. I think they are going to go to Minnesota and win. And I think we are going to get a "you like that" from Taylor Heineke, and it is going to be glorious.
Would
I love it.
would they be able to go to Minnesota?
It would be the 7 seed.
Yeah. Okay, yeah.
As a 2 seed, yeah. That'd be fun.
Okay, yeah.
Be a fun game for sure. I think that for me so I'm going to start with the Lions briefly, right? So with the Lions, I feel like it's pretty simple, right? You have to win the rest of your games. If you do that, you're going to have a shot, right? And although I still think it's pretty unlikely that they will do that, and even if they do, there's still a chance they may not make it in. I just want to see this team have a lot of positive momentum going into next year because they're going to have a high pick from the Rams. They're probably going to have, a relatively, even if it's a middle of the pack first round pick from themselves, obviously, if they play well the rest of the year, they're going to have the opportunity to kind of do whatever they want because you don't, especially if he continues to play this way, you do not have to move from Jared Goff this year either. You don't. Like, you just don't have to do it. And I don't think any of the quarterbacks that they'll be in range to draft, especially if the Rams maybe pick up a win or two the rest of the year where they're not in that top 5 range. None of these guys are worth, hedging your bets on, I don't think, outside the top 2 guys. Even those guys I have questions with still. I think that it gives you a lot of flexibility to be able to kind of just build up everything even more. You've pretty much already have an offensive line built for the most part. There's guys that I guess you could upgrade from, but for the most part, you don't really have to do that. Just think Goff is good enough. The running back situation, if Swift continues to play well, is fine. You have a lot of receivers you like. Like, it's really just about building up the defense even more and adding more talent to that. So if you can do that while also playing well the rest of the year and kind of giving yourself a boost to kind of come off from going into next year, that's really the biggest thing. Not just making the playoffs, which would be really good for Dan Campbell, but getting into that picture and staying there. Washington, though, I think is clearly the team that is the most likely to jump into the playoffs, especially if the Giants do continue to kind of fall from grace a little bit and get back to where kind of we thought they'd be, maybe just a more competitive version of that team that we thought they'd be, but not so competitive that they have 7 wins to this point in the season. So I'm definitely going with them as my pick to definitely make it in at this point. But do want to move into the AFC now. Some more teams to talk about. We'll try not to spend too much time on each team like we did with the Lions and Washington. But right now we have 2 6-6 and 2 5-7 teams, all of which are varying degrees of where they're at with their season. But we're going to start with Tony here. What do you think about Patriots, Browns, Chargers, and Steelers even now?
Yeah, so my sleeper AFC playoff team was the Las Vegas Raiders.
Yeah.
I say was because Baker Mayfield put the nail in that coffin. They're 5-8. There's just no hope.
No.
Running down the list, Patriots 6-6. Yeah, I could see them getting in, but God, they suck. Chargers 6-6. I can't see them getting in. They're a mess. I think they have the best quarterback out of the group. I think they have a better quarterback than a couple of the wildcard teams, but they suck. They are terrible. I'm at the point where get Brandon Staley out of there. I'm not going to try to predict anything with them other than disappointment. Browns, no, we saw Deshaun Watson last week. He's not going to be able to figure it out this year. It's going to be growing pains, and people are going to be saying Jacoby Brissett might have led us to the playoffs. The Steelers, I think the Steelers, if any of these teams can do it, I think it is the Steelers. I don't think they're going to do it because I don't see the 8-4, 8-4, 7-5 wildcard teams dropping off that hard. But if any of the teams can, it is the Steelers because they have the coach with experience. They have young pieces that can figure it out down the stretch. They have TJ Watt. None of those other teams have a TJ Watt. And their schedule isn't terrible. Like Ravens, Tyler Huntley.
Yeah.
Raiders. Ravens, maybe the bottom falls out and it's still Tyler Huntley, and then Browns. And that is a winnable schedule. So if any team does it, it is the Steelers. I just don't think any of the teams do it.
Fair enough. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, looking at the Patriots schedule, who's the only other team that I really trust out of that group. And look, it's not that the Chargers don't have good pieces. It's just that they don't have enough of them healthy right now. There's just way too many injuries. They continue to be kind of like the San Francisco 49ers, where it's just like, gotta be kidding me, man. But the Patriots schedule down the stretch at Cardinals, at Raiders versus Bengals, at home versus Dolphins, and then at Bills. That's a tough schedule. That's a rough 5 games. Especially the last 3. You're going against 3 presumably playoff teams right there. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see. I think that the Jets do fall off just because I'm not a believer in Mike White. And I'm very interested to see if another team can take over and come up and fill in that spot. But I do think it's going to be Pittsburgh if it's anybody, just because they have the coaching. TJ Watt changes everything for them. They've been playing a lot better. Yeah, so I agree with Tony. If it's any of these teams, it's going to be Pittsburgh.
Yeah, and as someone who is a Pittsburgh Steelers fan, right? We know that I don't think this team is good, right? I think we kind of all know that. However, and this is something that I'm going to struggle with this year, and I've struggled with in the past, is Mike Tomlin has this uncanny way of making sure that no matter how bad his team may be, there will be no losing seasons here. Okay? I don't care if we have to be so mediocre that it's literally impossible to enjoy. We're going to get it done somehow. And, maybe that doesn't lead to the playoffs this year, which probably not. But if they run the table, I won't be surprised. If they also finish 7-10, I also still won't be surprised. But I do think there's a middle ground there that is more realistic. I think that most likely this team is an 8-9 football team at the end of the year, which, again, considering how we started, everyone's going to be able to say, oh, well, I mean, they played so much better in the second half of the season. I'd be like, yes, but at what cost? What position is our draft pick going to be? 15? That's not any good. That doesn't help us right now. Like, this team desperately needs a top 10 pick, really a top 5 pick. They desperately need it, and they're never going to get it because I can play quarterback for this team and we'll find a way to win 7 games. It doesn't matter. It doesn't make any sense. As much as, like, I don't want to complain about it because I have a good head coach, it's ridiculous. Like, we're never going to be able to actually get a premium talent through the draft unless we happen to draft one like we did with Watt where everybody passed over them, because we're never bad enough. And, like, I appreciate that, obviously. Like, it's good to have a team that's just not able to be bad. But at some point, maybe being bad is better than being mediocre. And I think that's kind of what we're struggling with right now. But yes, if the Steelers make the 7th seed, not going to be surprised. And I will gladly take my beat down by probably the Chiefs or whoever it's going to be. I'll take it, I guess, whatever. But it's still ridiculous to me that we're even in position to maybe do that. But whatever. Moving on from all that, let's get into the games, especially I want to talk about a couple lines, especially during some of these games I find interesting. And it's kind of starting right away with the Jets at Buffalo game. I understand why, but also, like, not really, based on the kind of trajectory of these teams as we currently stand. I'm going to throw it to Tony first, of course. What do you think about this game score-wise, and do you think the -10 line is a little bit rich?
So I think that there has been this perception that the sky is falling for the Bills. And through that stretch where the sky was falling, they lost two games, won 3 or 4, like, just beat the shit out of the Patriots. Have a mini bye now, getting healthier. I know we lost Von Miller, but getting healthier everywhere else. This line is an indication that Vegas's perception of the team has not changed despite national media's changing. And while I do think 10 points is a lot and it makes it hard to bet, if it were anything less than that, every sharp bettor in the world would be hammering the Bills. Yeah. The Jets right now are more of an idea than an actual team. People love to think like, oh yeah, they upgraded that quarterback to Mike White. They've got this vibe now, like they're gonna get it done. Nah, they're feisty. They muck it up and they can steal games like that, but they're still not good. And I know they beat the Bills a month ago, and so that like lends credence to, hey, it should be a closer line, but it's in Buffalo. The weather sucks. You know who really struggles when the weather sucks? quarterbacks who can't throw. You know what Mike White is? A quarterback who can't throw. We've talked about how he's doing good things, but he's not talented. That's the weather hurts him. So 10 points is a lot. I get it. I have the Bills winning 31-17, and I think it's because their offense has figured out the run game. We were like dead last in rushing EPA per play through the first 11 weeks of the season. Now we're number 6. James Cook has been really, really getting confident and getting going. We're also more willing to dump off to the short game. Josh, he was playing that hero ball stretch in the middle where he was forcing things, bad turnovers. We saw it really peak in the Jets game, and that was really why we lost. But he's back to his old way of all right, fine. You're going to give me 10 yards with my running back. I'm going to take 10 yards with my running back. So offensively, I don't think the Bills are really going to struggle all that much. The question then comes, before it was, is Matt Milano going to play? Officially, he is playing. I think that erases any doubt about us being able to stop the Jets offense. Mike White threw 4 interceptions against this team last year. Maybe he does the same thing. Either way, I don't think they're getting a ton of points on the board. So overall, 31-17, I think the 10 points makes sense.
Fair enough. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, I agree. I have Buffalo winning 31-21. So right on the 10 points. But look, Buffalo is the much better team. Their offense is far better. Their defense is far better. That's what the Jets have, is a really good defense. They have a fantastic defense, but the Bills just have too many weapons on their offense for the Jets to overcome. Gabe Davis is that dude. Stephon Diggs is that dude. The running back, the running situation, as Tony said, is a lot better. Josh Allen's playing better football, but the defense, I know that they lost Von Miller, but this defense is far healthier than it was even with losing Von Miller. They have Jordan Poyer back. This is a very different team. So where the Jets have a good defense, the Bills have a fantastic offense and a fantastic defense. So I'm going to take 2 over 1, and the Bills they get the job done this time. It's time to stop pretending that the Jets are what the Jets were at the beginning of the season.
Fair enough. I do have it being a closer game, and the main reason is because I think that at this point, right, I think the Jets defense is legit, right? I think that they can at least keep the Bills from running up the score, right? The question then becomes, can the Jets offense do enough to actually force the Bills into feeling a little bit of pressure, right? That's really what it comes down to. And I think that part's going to be tough, just considering, again, it's Mike White. I know he's played very good football so far this year. It's just at some point, realistically, we've seen this story play out, right? We know how guys like him end up turning out, and it sucks, but that's just kind of the nature of the sport. There's a certain amount of physical tools that lend itself to playing in the league for a long time, at least as a starter. He doesn't really have those. I'm going to say 28-24 Buffalo. I think that what's going to ultimately happen is I think the Jets do get a late drive to kind of bring the game close to that 28-24 mark, and then they just do not get the football back because Josh Allen puts the game away. That's kind of what I think the game script's going to be, but it's probably going to be, it's going to look closer on the scoreboard than it ultimately is at the end of the game. Moving to Baltimore at Pittsburgh favored at home. Definitely a lot of reasons for that, but we talked about Lamar injury already. What do you think for this game, Zach?
Yeah, I have Baltimore winning 21-17. Not Baltimore, my bad. Pittsburgh winning 21-17. Okay. I'm off today. I'm a little tired.
Me too.
But look, TJ Watt matters. I said this earlier. TJ Watt matters for this Pittsburgh team. It's kind of tied everything together for them. All the things that they were missing. The defense is able to stop. For some reason, that means the offense is able to move now. I don't understand that one, but that is what it is. It works. But Tyler Huntley, as I said, fantastic backup, but he's a backup quarterback. The backup doesn't necessarily win all that many games for you. And I think this is one of the ones that you do lose because it's at Pittsburgh. It'll probably be a funky game. The defense, this is going to be a good old-fashioned defensive shootout that we've seen before from Baltimore, Pittsburgh in the past. Points will be at a premium. I have a bit more faith in Pittsburgh and their starting quarterback than Baltimore and their backup plan.
Fair enough. What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I've got almost identical score, but same margin. I have Pittsburgh winning 20-16. I feel like I've already said a lot about both of these teams, so I'll just kind of keep it brief here. Pretty much everything Zach said. I think Tyler Huntley's good, but that offense is just boring, not conducive to putting up points in an efficient and overwhelming manner. Pittsburgh, as I said, I think has been figuring things out. I think they're going to feed George Pickens because I said that they were going to feed him last week, and then he got really upset. And then Tomlin said that he was happy that he got really upset. And that tells me that they're going to feed him. So I think Pittsburgh just pulls out one here and starts their little late playoff push that we were talking about.
Fair enough. I do have Steelers winning 24-20. I think that they get it done this week, and we'll kind of see where it goes from there. But again, this team has always played the Ravens well, especially since Lamar's gotten there. Even with him in there, he hasn't played very well against us. Huntley did not do much of anything against us last year either. I think this team is a better football team than it was last year when these teams played. You could say the same thing about the Ravens, but again, I think that right now we're just a little bit better of a football team overall without Lamar in there. Moving to Minnesota at Detroit. Again, Detroit favored in this game despite having half as many wins as Minnesota, and I think there's a lot of reasons for that, but we kind of talked about that with the lines already. What do you guys have for a score prediction? Let's go to Tony again.
Yeah, I think this is going to be an awesome game. As much as Detroit's been playing better defense, the Vikings offense just has the ability to put up points at will. And then the Vikings defense has been bad, and I think we're going to see that. So I have Detroit winning, but not covering the 2-point spread. I have them winning 34-33. The Vikings love to score 33 points. They've done it so many times this season.
Yeah, it's kind of weird.
I think it just comes down to the winning ways have started to seep through in Detroit. They're always in these games, but they fall short. And I think maybe it's like getting down there and kicking a field goal with time expiring. But I just have more faith in what they're doing right now. And I think the Vikings are on a kind of a stumble path right now. So I do have the Lions pulling this one out.
What do you think, Zach?
So I do have Minnesota scoring some points, but I have Detroit scoring a lot more. I have Detroit winning 35-24. I think that the offense is not going to be able to keep up. The Detroit Lions have one of the best red zone offenses in the league. And as we just said, the Minnesota defense sucks. It's awful. It's like one of the worst units in the league. They have Harrison Smith, they have Patrick Peterson, but they're kind of like functioning off of turnovers and name recognition alone. Besides that, it's not good. Jamal Williams scores again. I would take that touchdown prop as soon as possible. Yeah, I don't think I don't see Minnesota keeping up.
Fair enough. I decided late that I was going to take Minnesota 31-28 in this game. I just feel like this is going to be one of those games where Detroit does make it very difficult for Minnesota. But at the end of the day, I expect a certain player for the Vikings to make a huge play. I'm not even going to bother saying who it is. I think we all know who I'm talking about. That's basically kind of the trump card. I think that is Justin Jefferson is kind of the reason I'm going to go ahead and give them the edge in this one. Moving to Jacksonville at Tennessee. I would be more interested in talking about the over-under for rushing yards by Derrick Henry in this game because of what he's done to this franchise and just absolutely buried them in the sand. But we'll talk about the game itself first. What do you think for this one, Zach?
Yeah, I have Tennessee winning 24-16. I think Jacksonville is a bit on a free fall at the moment. They had their like magnum opus of beating the Ravens, and then everything just fell apart. They only scored 14 points against the Lions, which, I mean, we talked about them playing better defense, but the unit itself is not necessarily the greatest. The team is just very young and immature. And I think that's the biggest issue that they're having at the moment is they just need more time to just get acclimated to being in the NFL and just being on the next level. Doug Peterson's done a great job at stabilizing the franchise, especially after Urban Meyer. But like, there's still a lot of steps to go. So yeah, I have Tennessee winning 24-16. They take care of business, get that much closer to an AFC South title.
All right, what do you think, Tony?
Yeah, similar score prediction. I'll just say, so I think if Trevor Lawrence were fully healthy, this does have the potential for them to take over in the passing game, because that's where the Titans defense is beatable. We just saw just go routes toasting them last week with AJ Brown. And it like I would be inclined to predict a Jags win and big time action from the passing game. But I think what this toe injury is going to do to Lawrence is really limit his mobility and therefore extension of plays and creativity once things break down. And that's really where I think he's special. So I think we're going to see a somewhat muted offense from them. And when game get ugly, the Titans know how to win them. And the Derrick Henry factor, if it's a close game, he's going to be able to continue to be leaned on. So I have Tennessee winning 24-21. And I really wish that we had a fully healthy Lawrence, because I think things could be a bit different if he were healthy.
Yeah, I do agree with that for sure. With Lawrence, if he's healthy, that this game's different. I have 31-21 Tennessee. I think it's going to be kind of not a runaway game, but a pretty close to that. I think Derrick Henry is going to have, however many yards he decides he wants to have, and also as many touchdowns as he chooses to have as well. So pretty much it just depends on the play calling there. But I wouldn't be surprised if this is another like 150 plus 2 or 3 touchdown day for Derrick Henry. So, moving on to Philadelphia at New York. Giants specifically, we have +7 line for this one, which I think is pretty fair at this point. You kind of know the Giants are starting to fall off a little bit, but what do you think for this one, Zach?
I have Philadelphia winning 30-23. I don't think that the Giants can keep up with the Eagles offensively. Saquon's a bit hampered, and that's a big boon in Philadelphia's favor. And we've also seen Philadelphia over the past few weeks really get the passing game going, which is not good for the Giants. So I have them winning 30-23, starting to separate themselves a bit from the rest of the AFC or the NFC East and really take over that title.
What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I don't think this one's going to be particularly close. I think that line's honestly smaller than it should be. I think the only reason it's at 7 points is because what the Giants do with the blitz is kind of where the only area that we've seen Hurts struggle. But they play so much man coverage, and we've seen what this passing game does to man coverage last week, that I just can't predict anything other than a big Eagles win. So I have them winning 27-17. I do think that's going to be a blowout that looks close at the end situation. I think they're going to get up big early. They're going to just kind of slow things down at that point, and it's going to be it's going to be 27-10. With a couple minutes left, and the Giants are going to get a nice little happy morale touchdown. But it's going to be a blowout in all senses other than the final score.
It's funny, we're on the same page here, Tony. 27-17 Eagles for me as well. I will say I think that Barkley, since he is playing and he's listed as healthy, I think that he'll at least be able to do some stuff for them in the run game, but it's just not going to be enough to overcome what Philly can do. And I will say the line if Philly was at home would be +10 or -10 for them, just because give them the 3-point boost. So it is really probably closer to that type of situation for them. Cleveland at Cincinnati. I don't know. What do you think for this one, Tony? We'll go back to you.
So yeah, we've seen the reemergence of last year's Bengals, which it hadn't really been present through the first half of the season, and we're going to see a continuation of that because the Browns have a really bad defense. Despite their defense scoring 3 touchdowns last week against the Texans, they do have a bad defense. So let's not forget that. And the Bengals are just going to capitalize. They're going to be throwing it deep. They're going to be Jamar Chase touchdowns. There's going to be Samaje Perine touchdowns. There's going to be Joe Mixon touchdowns. Everybody's going to get in on it. I have them winning 41-20. I think that the Browns offense will at least be able to do something, especially in that type of game script. It's easier to do things, but it's never going to matter. It's not going to be close.
Yeah, I have Cincinnati winning 31-17. The Browns scored 3 touchdowns, but they were 3 non-offensive touchdowns, which I think is very important to point out against a very, very, very bad Houston Texans team. But there is some obvious rust on Deshaun Watson, who has played his first one game in 2 years. So I don't know how they keep up. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Nick Chubb, I mean, is a monster and has been fantastic this season, but I don't see how they can keep up with the Bengals.
I think for me, and I agree with you guys for pretty much everything. I actually think that this game is going to get ugly. I think that Cincinnati is going to win 28-14. I think that at this present moment in time, if Cleveland really cared about trying to keep their hopes alive, that Sean Watson would not be playing quarterback for them. As much as Brissett is not nearly as talented, you're asking a guy who, for very good reason, has not played football in a long time to come in and try to play football after a long time. And understandably, like, you want to get him some reps before the end of the year so that way he's prepared to go into the offseason, since you did guarantee him a big-ass contract. But I just don't think that he's going to play well at all this year until, maybe at the end if he finally gets things going. But they're just not a super talented offense from a receiver standpoint outside of Amari Cooper. The offensive line hasn't played as well as, I think they were hoping it has. And just things in general aren't going as well as they hoped it would. And I won't be surprised if it gets really ugly. Like, I'm talking 3 or 4 turnovers by the Browns, Cincinnati kind of just running away with it at the end and not really having to worry too much about it. But definitely interesting to see how that plays out. Houston at Dallas. Goodness gracious. I don't really know what to even say about Houston at this point. I appreciate how hard they're leaning into it as far as tanking goes. I think that at least they're making it very obvious, which is always fun. You don't want to have to throw that out there and have to wonder if it's true or not. They are tanking. Kyle Allen. I'm sorry, man. You're just kind of the sacrificial lamb in this scenario. Micah Parsons is your gift for getting to play games for this team. What do you think for this one, Zach?
Yeah, I have Dallas winning 43-13. Dallas has been one of the few teams that has put up 40 points multiple times this season, and I don't see why that ends this week. They've got a good team. The offense is they're able to rush both Tony Pollard and Ezekiel Elliott from the backfield now, which is just absolutely dangerous for the rest of the league. They're really coming together at the right time. Their defense is just suffocating. It's I would not want to be the Houston Texans this week.
Yeah.
What do you think, Tony? Yeah.
I also have them getting blown out. I think this is just no contest. It's a 17.5-point spread, and that's not enough. I have Dallas winning 37-10. I think it's just going to be a big time rushing game. Tony Pollard and Zeke are both going to get home in terms of fantasy. I'm worried about the production of the passing game because of how out of hand this is going to get so quickly. It's just going to be an absolute beat down joke of a game.
Yeah, I think we might see Cooper Rush at the 5-minute mark in the third quarter. Yes. I think that's very possible. I have 38-10, so very similar score, Tony. Almost identical again, which would have been fun. But I think that realistically, Dallas runs up the score in the first half, most likely. 28-0, possibly something around that line, something like that. And then they just kind of take off the brakes, or starting to put the brakes on and just kind of coast to the end. I think that we may see guys who have not played much at all this year for them just get in the game. So if you're very serious about the Cowboys and you want to see what your third stringers look like, you might get to see them. KC at Denver. So I have a problem with this game in the sense that, obviously Denver this year has not really lost games by a lot, right? Because their defense is so damn good that even though the offense scores, 16 points roughly almost every single game, they stay in games because the opposing team can't score much more than 16 points. But this is Kansas City, so I'm curious what you guys have as scores here. Let's go. It's back to Tony here.
Yeah, I think this is going to be I think Kansas City's going to cover, but it's going to continue questions of how viable this Chiefs offense will be in the playoffs. They still lead in all offensive categories, so it's not like I'm saying something crazy. I'm not saying that they're bad. I'm just saying that we've seen them struggle. We saw them struggle against the Rams. We saw them struggle heavily against the Bengals, and I think we're going to see them struggle against the Broncos. I have them winning 23-9. I don't think offensive struggles matter when you're playing the Broncos because they are the epitome of offensive struggles. Struggle isn't a good enough word to describe what that offense is. I'm doing them a favor giving them 9 points, but I do think that they're going to really stifle the Mahomes offense, lead to a lot of field goals, lead to a lot of disappointment, even though it is a 14-point win?
Yeah, it'd be a 14-point win. Yeah. What do you think, Zach?
Yeah, so I just noticed I did something a little cheeky.
Okay.
And my score is Kansas City 28, Denver 16, which if you know anything about betting trends this year, I believe almost every single Denver game is at the under.
Yeah.
The under is at 44 and a half.
So just
44 points.
Right.
Yeah. Look, Denver has a great defense. And I don't think that you can hold that against Kansas City. However, the offense is horrific, and Kansas City is going to get plenty of chances to score the football. I do think that Denver scores a little bit more. I do think that at some point Russ is just something's going to click with somebody, and he'll hit something every now and then, but it's not going to be enough to do anything. Yeah, 28-16, a little bit. They cover, but it's enough to be like, all right, there's no issues here.
I got 24-10 Kansas City. So same spread as you had, Tony, just a little bit more.
Man, we're on the same page today.
Yeah, we really are. Hopefully that means something good, or we're just really bad. We'll find out, I guess. But I think that with Kansas City, right, they're going to score enough points to make it pretty comfortable, and then Denver's just going to be in comeback mode constantly, and Russell Wilson is not certainly going to cook. Other than maybe get cooked by, probably Chris Jones multiple times. But I think the problem with Denver at this point is that they're bad.
Yeah, no, they are.
That's the problem with it, is they're not good, and I don't think they're going to be good, guys. I just don't. I think Russell Wilson should reconsider his entire life and maybe just go home to his 8 million bathrooms and pick one to hang out in occasionally, and give his money back to Denver and make like weird, like religious undertone related TikToks with his family. That's probably what he should do instead. Like that feels like a better option than whatever it is he's been doing this year. But we'll worry about that later. Tampa Bay at San Francisco. I struggle with this one because I always do with Tampa this year, because like I don't know if they're good or not. And in fact, I'm actually pretty confident that they're not. But it doesn't matter because the NFC South is worse. So like, I don't know. What do you guys think for this one? Let's start with Zach here.
Yeah, I have San Francisco winning 23-14. I don't really think it matters who plays quarterback for San Francisco. Their offensive, their offensive weapons are too good. Their defense is much too good for that to really like make a difference. And Brock Purdy wasn't bad. Everybody calls him Mr. Irrelevant, but I don't think it has anything to do with Brock Purdy. I think eventually we all have to look at Kyle Shanahan and look at the quarterbacks that Kyle Shanahan has had and be like, you know what? Respect. You have made chicken fillets out of chicken crap, and it is absolutely impressive. It is absolutely impressive. And I think it is a testament to his coaching that they've had probably one of the sorrier quarterback situations over the past few years, and they've done incredible things with that.
What do you think, Tony?
Yeah, I have San Francisco winning 19-16 because I do think that Brock Purdy, like, not great. Tampa Bay's defense pretty good, but ultimately, when you have two teams that unclear offensive situations, to say the least, for different reasons, for very obviously different reasons, and then two extremely good defenses, I'm just going to take whoever the best coach is. And we have seen Todd Bowles routinely make decisions that hurt his team, and we have seen Kyle Shanahan do things that help his team a lot. And that's where the margins come from. It's just that's how this game is going to be won. It's not about Brock Purdy. It's not about Tom Brady. It is about Shanahan versus Bowles, and that is just a massive mismatch.
Fair enough. And I did ultimately have San Francisco winning 21-17. I did go back and forth a little bit just because, like, I don't know what to think of Tampa at this point. But yeah, I just honestly, truly believe that they're not a very good football team. And I think that will that matter at the end of the day? Probably not, because they're going to get a home playoff game because they're going to win their division. They're going to play like, I don't know who it's going to be. I mean, if it's Dallas, I think they lose because I think Dallas would be the 5 seed and they'd be the 4 seed as long as Dallas doesn't win the division somehow over Philly. So that I think could make it so it'd be interesting. But I have a feeling they're going to get in the playoffs and they're going to win their first playoff game and they're going to get on a run and they're going to do what Tom Brady always does. But in the meantime, I don't think it's going to start with this game. I think that San
I
Francisco.
I think they could get hosed by any of the 3 division the 3 wild card teams.
They could, but I'm not going to pick that if they get any of those matchups other than
I'll do it. I'll take the sacrifice.
Yeah, we know what happens, unfortunately. That's kind of where I'm at with it. They're not as good as those teams, but they're, is what it is. But I do think Tampa loses. I think that they're at a place right now where their defense is still very good. The offense is so weird. Brady's averaging it feels like 6 yards per attempt for some reason, which again, we always joked about for years about him being like a check down guy as like a not actual thing, but like a joke. Now it feels like from at least a yards per attempt standpoint, they can't get anything going down the field, and I don't know if they're going to. So let's move on to Carolina at Seattle. Seattle definitely still probably my favorite team in the NFL this year, just because the Geno Smith train continues to roll along, and I want it to continue to do that. But what do you guys think for this game? We'll go back to Tony here.
I have something weird here. I don't even know how I feel about it.
Oh, I like where this is
I do want to go on the record and say I think that the way that Seattle relies on their running backs and the situation at running back going into today matters. I think it matters more than it does for most teams.
Tony Jones.
And I think that the Panthers defense is good. I think that they are playing well under Steve Wilkes. And I think that their offense with Sam Darnold in is not bad. And I think that Donta Foreman behind this pretty good offensive line coming off of a bye week have the ability to do some real damage against a bad run defense. I think that the Carolina Panthers are going to win today, 27-24. So not like a huge, massive win or anything, but I think right now on paper, they match up very, very well to pull this off.
Fair enough. I can't really argue too much with that. What do you think, Zach?
I'm not quite that crazy with my prediction. Because I think there's some very, very big holes in Carolina's game that I don't trust Sam Darnold. Especially
I don't know why you wouldn't trust Sam Darnold, but
Tariq Woolen.
Yeah.
So I have Seattle winning 27-23. I do have Carolina covering, at least even. I do agree that Seattle relies very heavily on their running backs, and Travis Homer and Tony Jones aren't necessarily the 2 guys that I would want backing me up on a very, very good. But Geno Smith is Geno Smith, and he's going to get it done. So, yeah, 27-23.
In the battle of former New York Jet bust quarterbacks, one of them is good and the other one is not. So I'm going to go with the one that is Seattle 27-20. I won't be surprised if Carolina either makes it closer or does win the game, just because, again, Seattle's run game is going to be an issue most likely. I do think that the combination of Tony Jones Jr. and Travis Homer might be enough against this Carolina team, but I think it comes down to whether or not Metcalf and Lockett can eat, and Geno's on point there. And I think that they will be enough to kind of get this win, even if it's a tough fought one. Last game we're going to talk about before the Sunday night game, which is going to be our game of the week. New England at Arizona, just disgusting, right? This is disgusting. Why is this what we're getting? Why is this Monday Night Football? What is going on with the primetime games this year, guys?
There were some guesses that were made that were not.
Oh yeah,
some you think hardcore guesses. Look at the Christmas Day schedule.
I already looked at it. I'm glad that I'll be doing stuff with my family and probably not paying much attention. So
I'll be asleep
about that. Fair enough. But New England at Arizona, nobody cares. But Tony, go first on this one.
Yeah, this is a weird one. I didn't know what to do with it. I still don't know what to do with it. I have Arizona. I do have them winning 24-20 because I do think that mobile quarterbacks have given the Belichick defense fits in the past, and he's looked good. He's looked healthy. He has Hopkins and Hollywood Brown. I think they might try to go deep. It's tough because the Patriots could very easily make this like a blowout, and it wouldn't surprise me either. But just where the Patriots are, where the Cardinals are, I think they're two bad teams, bad in kind of similar ways, and I'm just going to give it to the better quarterback.
Fair enough.
I have New England winning 24-20. Yeah. I trust New England's rushing attack more. Ramondre Stevenson has been fantastic, and Damian Harris, I mean,
I think he might be out, but Ramondre
is he still out?
Yeah,
man.
Honestly, that's
rough
probably
season.
Ramondre's a beast.
But that's probably better. Yeah, you're right. It's probably because Ramondre Stevenson's been fantastic. Mac Jones has been playing a little bit better football, and the Patriots offense outside of last week has been playing better. So I don't trust Arizona. And I think this is probably one of the last games that we're going to see Cliff Kingsbury in Arizona. I think his time is running very, very short.
Yep, I agree with that, and I also think it's for the best if they get rid of him, obviously, and if they continue to lose. But I do have New England winning 17-14 in just an ugly, terrible, no good football game.
Ooh.
I think Monday night's going to suck a lot, and it's gonna be what it is. However, I mainly think with New England the fact that they've always been very good, obviously, at kind of taking away your team's number one option, which is obviously Hopkins. If he does not have a big game, Arizona does not have a big game, in my opinion. I don't think that they can lean on their other players and expect to do a whole lot. Murray will make some weird stuff happen because he is obviously fantastic at that stuff, but it's just not his year. I think that in the future, the contract will look better as they kind of build things up and maybe move on from Kingsbury. But this year, I just don't see it happen. So I'll take New England 17-14. But we do have a game Sunday night that is hopefully, even with the Chargers having a lot of issues, going to be much more fun than the last couple games we just talked about. We do have Miami at LA Chargers here. Very interesting game because of the quarterbacks that play in this game. There's obviously been a lot of conversation about both of these quarterbacks over the past couple years, and the narrative has certainly flipped to a certain degree, for better or for worse. For me, this was really tough because I do know what team I think is better right now, obviously, but it feels like one of those games where the guy that has been kind of getting put on the back burner by the media and other situations, I feel like he might show up more than he ever has in this game for a good reason. But I want to start with Zach here, obviously a Miami fan here with us. What do you think with this game? How do you see it going?
So last week was interesting because the offensive line played well. They played a surprisingly good game. Tua was uncharacteristically shook for most of the game. I don't know why. I think there might have been a lot of concern on his part after getting absolutely dogged in Houston. That's what he was expecting, and just some of those throws were completely off. His timing with his receivers was uncharacteristic for this season. I don't think that happens 2 weeks in a row. The Chargers offense is suspect, and while I do have them winning 27-21, I'm more concerned about Miami's defense than I am about Miami's offense. There's just a lot of things that the Chargers don't defend well against that Tua excels in that I expect him to take advantage of today. I just am very concerned about the secondary. Xavier Howard's had a very down year. Byron Jones has been out for the entire season. They have not necessarily played as well. The pass rush and front seven has been doing a bit better as of late, but you need a bit more with Austin Eckler. He is going to be a very dynamic threat, especially against a team that has let running backs get the better of them continuously. So I have them winning. I would not be surprised to see the Chargers cover. I'm a bit surprised that the Chargers are the underdog, especially being at home. However, they do have all the injuries. So,
what do you think, Tony?
Yeah, it's there's a lot of nuance to this game that I think is going to be ignored. This is a game where you don't want to be on Twitter. Zach, I know you kind of denounced Dolphins Twitter. I know Spoon was attacked by them despite being like such a glowing positive force on reporting about Dolphins stuff. It's a bunch of children, and children don't really look at things in a nuanced and full picture way. So Twitter's going to be a bad place. It is going to be people who like Tua saying that he is the GOAT and Herbert sucks, and vice versa, when in reality they're just two good quarterbacks that we should celebrate.
Everybody can have their own quarterback. Not one has to like the Burrow has been fantastic for the Bengals. Tua has been fantastic for the Dolphins. Herbert's been great for the Chargers. They can all coexist in the same space.
Of course not. What do you mean, Zach?
We will see that tonight. We will see two really good quarterbacks play against each other. But that is not what the talk will be. The talk will be is whoever wins is the best ever, and whoever loses sucks and should retire and never play football again. That is why you should avoid Twitter and enjoy a really good football game. Now, people know me. I do think Herbert's better in a vacuum, but football is not played in a vacuum. It is played with a bunch of other surroundings that ultimately defines legacies. And so the talk out of this game will be about Tua and how he rose up to the challenge and beat the Chargers. The Chargers don't have Derwin James. He was their only hope at stifling this offense. I think Tua is going to have his way with the defense. There's really not going to be any challenge to him. What the 49ers did, pressing at the line and getting pressure with guys like Nick Bosa, and you can't do that. And you don't have Fred Warner, and you can't do what the 49ers did. And Tua is not going to be as bad as he was last week. So Tua is going to have his way. They're going to put up 34 points, and that's going to be easy for them. The Chargers, their offense is healthier. Their offensive line still not quite, but their weapons. Mike Williams is playing. Now, the question is Mike Williams healthy, or is he the kind of healthy where he catches one pass and immediately re-injures his ankle? Because that matters to both the game and my fantasy team. But ignoring my fantasy team, that matters a lot, because if Mike Williams is fully healthy and has his Mike Williams abilities, they might win this game outright. I have them scoring 28 points because Herbert's going to really go into hero mode and do a lot of crazy stuff, but it's just not going to be able to be enough to outscore this Miami Dolphins offense, which I think is going to be phenomenal. But either way, watch this game, turn off your phone, and have a really good time.
I definitely like that advice, Tony. What I'll say with this real quick first, I should say. You already mentioned the Twitter situation and the conversation about these quarterbacks. I think that so many people have bought into this idea of both quarterback wins as a stat and also about how guys are playing at the moment is all that matters. Where if you look at the career of Justin Herbert and Tua Tagovailoa, right? Clearly, by a wide margin, Herbert's been the better quarterback for their careers. Tua this year, though, has been significantly more productive and a better player on the field. And we all know why that is. It is not all of a sudden Tua is more talented than him. It's not all of a sudden that Tua like flipped a switch in terms of like all of a sudden he can make throws he couldn't make before and he can do all this stuff. He is in an offensive system that may be the greatest quarterback system match I have ever seen. And that's nothing against Tua, because he should be getting an offense, and every quarterback should have an offense that builds upon their strengths. Not everybody gets that. And I'm glad Tua did, because it is going to salvage his career whenever it had a really rough start. And I never want to see someone's career go up in flames because of the situation around them. But that's kind of what they're trending towards with the Chargers right now, because they have an offense that has absolutely zero juice. Nobody on that team can run at all except for Austin Eckler. Nobody has any get up, any go, none of it. It's all, short slants, sticks, whatever it is to just get consistent yardage. And you have a quarterback who can throw the ball anywhere on the field to anyone at any time, no matter where they are, basically. Like, we have not seen many guys with the talent level that Justin Herbert has. And the offensive scheme is basically, that's too bad. Play check down artists for us, please, because we don't have any juice. Of course, he's not going to look as good as really a lot of quarterbacks this year, because he does not have the offensive firepower nor the offensive coaching to allow them to use his talents to the best of his ability. We've seen flashes of what he's shown in the past this year. I mean, some of the throws he's made this year are better than anyone I've ever seen play, legitimately. It just doesn't matter when your offensive scheme is the way that it is and your team is injured. And there's no nuance, like you said, Tony. No one talks about the situations that people get into that allow this type of stuff to happen. All that matters is whether you win or lose, and that's true at the end of the day. But when you're assigning blame or saying how good a player is or isn't, and you're basing it off of team wins or you're basing it off of things that they do not have control over in any real way, you start to be able to just say whatever you want and be able to make any argument work as long as you can ignore the other things, right? And we all know who I'm talking about when I say that, I think, for the most part, as far as, analysts go. But again, this game is a microcosm of all that because I think Miami is going to win the game. I think it's going to be 28-27. I think it's very, very close. I think that Herbert does get them in position to maybe win. And I actually think there's a chance that they score 21, they're 21-28, they score and they go for 2 and they do not get it. I think that they will go for 2 if they have the opportunity to win the game at the last second. And I think that, they just don't make the play. And guess what's going to happen on social media? Herbert didn't get it done. He didn't, Tua's obviously way better than him. And also, so we know how it's going to be. But at the end of the day, these are 2 quarterbacks. So I'm hoping, especially in Herbert's case, can have the right type of team around them to succeed in the future, because with Tua, you have an offensive system that is just brilliant and team and players around him who are brilliant and can allow him to play to his strengths. And we could see some huge offensive seasons from him in the future. And with Herbert, I just want to see him throw the ball down the field a little bit, guys. That's all I'm asking. I don't even need it to be anything crazy. Just something other than this, right? Draft somebody who can run a little bit. That's pretty much where I'm at with it. But super fun game, I think. I'm hoping that people are able to enjoy it to some degree and not just wallow in their own self-pity regardless of the outcome. But that'll do it for us, unless you guys have anything else you want to say on that game. I'm sure you guys kind of I'm already kind of tired of it, and it hasn't happened yet. Like, I already know what's going to happen after the game, but it is what it is. But let everybody get out of here. Thanks for joining us this week. We'll be back next week, of course. Getting close to the end of the season, kind of try to figure out what we want to do for playoffs and stuff. I'm sure we'll have plans for that. But in the meantime, definitely follow anything ATB. Make sure you follow us here. You can see our ats on the screen if you're watching at home. And thank you so much for joining us. Have a great football weekend.